Lakehead University announces the members of a major new task force. More debate on the Senate expenses scandal. And the Boston Red Sox jump out to an early World Series lead.
Good evening and thank you for joining us. Lakehead University officials are providing more details on a new task force set up to deal with the issue of sexual assault.
Last weekend, a 22-year-old LU student wrote a letter to the editor of the city's daily newspaper claiming she was raped by a fellow student off campus. She didn't go to police because she didn't want to go through a trial with her attacker. She also claims her multiple pleas to Lakehead officials about switching classes and writing exams in other locations so she would not have to come in contact with the man were rejected. In light of the incident, the president of the university is taking action with the introduction of this task force. The hope is to shed light on the current university policies and what they can do in order to make the situation better and prevent a similar occurrence in the future. Matt Scooby has more.
Dr. Brian Stevenson wants to see a change to the policies for dealing with sexual assault at Lakehead University.
I think the policies in place that we had to help a student under those circumstances, obviously I think were not sufficient from what I can see from the letter. So what we're trying to do is to figure out how we can improve those.
Stevenson has established the Task Force on Sexual Assault Education, Prevention, and Support. It will examine how Lakehead deals with the issue and make recommendations based on its findings. Stevenson says in the absence of a formal complaint to the university or police, they may be limited in what action they take. But he wants the options expanded when it comes to circumstances like this.
We deal with a lot of different kinds of issues on this campus. Sexual assault is one of them, and supporting our students through a lot of different experiences. And we try to do it with compassion and support for the students. And I think what we want to do with this situation is to be able to address this issue with support and compassion for our students.
Chair of the Women's Studies Department, Dr. Lori Chambers, will lead the task force. So far, she's pleased with the swift response.
The administration is taking immediate action to say that we take this really, really seriously. We're distressed when our students are hurt, and we want to work very hard to ensure that the policies that are in place in this campus support our students when they need that support.
The task force will include faculty members, students, and members of the community. Chambers anticipates a lot of work and listening to a lot of testimony, but it's a challenge that must be faced head-on.
I don't think anyone yet in Canada has policies that are really up to par about sexual assault. And what we need to be doing is exactly what's happening on this campus, a holistic review of what policies are and are not available for students when they need help, and consideration of what best practices might be.
We have a responsibility to train the leaders of our society and our community. And I think what we want to do is be able to educate those leaders. We want to be able to sensitize them, and we want to be able to be a change agent in society so these kinds of issues are minimalized, if not eliminated altogether.
Because of privacy laws, Stevenson couldn't say if any staff members have been disciplined as a result of the incident with the 22-year-old female student. The task force is expected to present their report to the president next spring. Matt Scooby, TBT News.
In an unusual move, the Ontario Provincial Police have issued a caution to residents of Manitouwadge over a high-risk offender who is residing in the community. He is 74-year-old Gordon Joseph Oliver, who has recently been released from custody. Oliver has previously been convicted for sexual interference, invitation to sexual touching, and incest. Police say his release comes with several conditions, including prohibitions on contact with children, use of computers, travel, and possession of firearms.
A Thunder Bay man accused in a 2011 homicide case now has a date for his murder trial next year. 24-year-old Kyle Ray has chosen to be tried by a judge and jury. Ray was originally charged with aggravated assault after the incident in October 2011 at a townhouse off Limbrick Street. His friend, 21-year-old Jimmy Muniz, was taken to hospital in critical condition with a serious head injury. Muniz later died in hospital, and the charges against Ray were upgraded to second-degree murder. Police would not say how the injury to Muniz occurred, but sources indicate the victim was pushed down a flight of stairs. A preliminary hearing held last year determined there was enough evidence for the case to go to trial. 10 days have been set aside at the Superior Court of Justice starting on May 20th of 2014.
The identities have now been released of the other 4 victims in that horrific crash near Uppsala last weekend. Among the deceased are 26-year-old Brady Robert Austell and his brother 27-year-old Andrew John Austell, both from Kitchener, Ontario. They were among 4 men in a pickup truck which collided with an oncoming transport on Highway 1117 west of Uppsala on Saturday. The other victims in the pickup are 42-year-old Kyle Prince from Waterloo and 44-year-old James Jackson from Fort Erie. The 43-year-old driver of the transport was also killed. The OPP previously identified him as Sequinder Thandi of Cambridge, Ontario. Postmortems were carried out in Toronto today in order to confirm the other identities. OPP say their investigation into the incident continues.
Last night on the NewsHour, we told you about the problem of thousands of tickets for public intoxication that are issued every year to the homeless here in Thunder Bay, with little or no hope that they will ever be paid. And to make matters worse, those tickets have valuable resources for both the police and those at Shelter House. So is there a solution to all of this? Well, that's what Courtney Rutherford set out to find today.
625.
If you want proof there's a problem, here it is. Thousands of tickets are being collected each year and sent right to the door of the Thunder Bay Shelter House. Citations to the homeless for being drunk and disorderly on public property. Close to 7,000 tickets were handed out last year. Most will never be paid, and many have said the system just isn't working.
It takes a long time to try and elevate yourself out of poverty, and in fact, many years might be spent on social assistance, gaining new skills and all that kind of thing. And so, of course, debt, unless you have a way to claim bankruptcy or have those loans forgiven, that's like a millstone around your neck, and yet another huge barrier.
Patty Haidu is the executive director of the Shelter House. She calls it a costly administrative response to a very social problem. Some say the solution is for the police to stop writing the tickets if they know the situation that person is dealing with and they know they will never pay them. For those hit with the tickets, it means the debt they owe to the courts will keep on climbing. And if they do turn their lives around, the money they owe is something they can't escape.
That fine compounds the stress and the barriers that they've already faced previously, and it sometimes can come to a point where that's a trigger for them or a reason, to not want to continue.
The job of the local police force is to uphold the law. Each officer uses his own discretion when writing a ticket. Mayor Keith Hobbs says it isn't a City Hall issue, and it should be left in the Chief of Police's hands. He believes they should cap the number of tickets issued to certain individuals swamped in fines. That's something the police chief says he won't be doing.
I mean, we have a pretty good idea, particularly our jailers who see the same people over and over would have a pretty good sense of how many times we see people. I really don't think that's an option. What other laws are you going to decide? We're going to use discretion if and when we're going to lay a charge and whether or not we're going to collect the fine money. I don't think it's a practical way of going about it.
In the end, there might not ever be a solution to this. Police, the courts, the collection agencies, and the homeless shelter, all caught up in a vicious circle doing their jobs. As for the tickets, in the meantime, they'll just keep adding up. Courtney Rutherford, TBT News.
City councillors are being inundated with emails and phone calls following a decision to remove a stand of trees. So too are administration, with requests from other homeowners looking for their so-called nuisance trees to be removed. Now, a Canada-wide organization has weighed in on the matter, and that has one member of council calling this week's vote a national embarrassment. Dennis Ward has the latest.
Councillor Angus?
Monday night's final vote on the fate of 11 trees hasn't put an end to the Tamarack talk, and it's not just council's ears that are ringing. The phones at the Infrastructure and Operations Office are buzzing too. General Manager Daryl Matson says the calls are steady and fall into 2 categories.
So it may have been an issue that we dealt with 3 or 4 years ago that have come back to us and say, can you come and take this tree down now? And the second type of call is related to the fact that people are phoning in and say, could you please come and take this tree down? So it's a new call.
Tree Canada, a national organization with a 20-year track record, has also been contacted on the Tamarack issue. President Michael Rosen says calls are coming from within and outside Thunder Bay from people who are, quote, aghast over the decision. Rosen feels taking down the trees will not work in the city's favor when accessing environmental funding in the future. Councillor Ken Boschkoff says the attention is not flattering.
More shocking to most people is the fact that it's become a national issue and the precedent-setting impacts are resonating in communities across the country. And I don't think we really wanted that to befall Thunder Bay as part of this discussion. So it tells you that these things are hot-button issues.
Boschkoff feels the issue has embarrassed the city, but Mayor Keith Hobbs says he stands by his vote to have the trees removed and help a neighborhood out.
You know, I don't care what Ken Boschkoff thinks about whether it's embarrassing us or not. Why aren't those people up on the Nor'westers taking a stand on city-owned property and us allowing someone to cut down trees there? Where were they when we took down trees at Chippewa to build the trails? Where are they when all throughout the city we're cutting down trees? You can't pick and choose your battles. Be consistent is what I say to Trees Canada.
There is still no timeline on when the trees will be coming down. Dennis Ward, TBT News.
Each year, the city of Thunder Bay invests millions of dollars into infrastructure renewal. That number's been climbing in recent years, with more money going into roads and other projects. But there's also a long list of major capital projects that are considered strategic over the next 4 years. Phase 2 of Golf Links Road, youth centers, and a proposed event center are all on the list. The total is nearly $150 million. About 40 people came out to a public information session held last evening on investing in public infrastructure. James Williams says he's proud of some of the changes going on in the city, but he has some concerns too. Williams says he's willing to take on additional debt to pay for some of the projects, even the less flashy ones like roads and sewer and water work.
That's certainly not in the public eye like the waterfront, so you do have to be mindful of the fact that when you turn your tap on, you expect water to come out. So just because you can't see it doesn't mean we don't need to pay for it. So yes, I do understand the importance of that and long-term planning. So I would be willing to take on some debt for those types of things if they're done right within budget.
Lucas Johnson wanted to get a look at some of the projects on the list and decide whether he thinks they will make the city a better place. He'd like to see the city take transit and cycling more seriously, and he'd be willing to take on additional debt too for things like an event center or youth center.
They're valuable investments. I don't see necessarily why we shouldn't be building these things, especially if we have buy-in from other levels of government to help pay for them.
The strategic priorities list and a budget directions update will go before council on Monday night.
It may take longer than expected to put a culvert in to help cyclists get across the city. Local resident Ken Shields has been trying for years to improve this unofficial bike path, which would link Winnipeg Avenue to Carrick Street. Right now, there's a creek about 6 feet wide blocking the path. Shields says the city promised to put a culvert in 3 years ago, and when it didn't happen, he started a petition. Last week, Active Transportation Coordinator Adam Kruper said the project is ready to move ahead this month, but now there's a discrepancy with the creek's designation. One local map calls it a ditch, but another says it's a stream with potential fish habitat. Kruper says it could take another 2 weeks to sort it all out before the culvert can be installed.
Ontario Regional Chief Stan Beardy and Association of Iroquois and Allied Indians Grand Chief Gord Peters are the latest to sound the federal government's new plan for First Nations education. They've labeled the proposed legislation a step backward and say it sets a path for a collision course with First Nations. They say that plan does not include any common understanding of existing funding inequities, and the chiefs add there will never be any movement forward if bills and legislation are rammed down their throats.
Drivers on the south end of Edward Street have a new set of stop signs to deal with. City crews have installed a four-way stop at the corner of Edward and Mary Streets near St. Martin's School. The city has also made a temporary change to stop signs at the corner of Leith and Syndicate Streets. It's been turned into an all-way stop for now, but on November 19th, the stop sign on Leith will be removed.
The latest production by Magnus Theatre is a one-man show that starts with Shakespeare's Macbeth and gives it a bizarre twist. The show, titled Mac Homer, is a theatrical production interpreted by almost the entire cast of The Simpsons. Jerry Getty is the actor who takes on the role of playing over 50 different characters. This is the first time this play has ever been produced by anyone other than its creator, Rick Miller. Getty says the most challenging part of playing all the characters is practicing how to go back and forth between the different voices.
That's disgusting! What, the shameful marketing? No, the liberty's taken with Shakespeare. Oh, you ain't seen nothing yet.
It's hilarious. It's absolutely hilarious, and it you know it makes it very accessible to people. Like some people find it hard to go see Shakespeare; they don't find it all that accessible. But when Shakespeare's done really, really well, it is accessible. In this case, it's obviously updated. There's a lot of modern speak, but it's still 75% Shakespeare.
The play opens tonight at Magnus Theatre and runs until November 9th.
With Remembrance Day just over 2 weeks away, Royal Canadian Legions in Thunder Bay and across the country are getting set to launch their annual Poppy campaign. Mayor Keith Hobbs joined members from local legions to raise the poppy flag at City Hall today. The annual campaign encourages people to wear a poppy in remembrance of those who have paid the ultimate sacrifice for our country. It also raises funds for the legions and community organizations that support veterans. Jim Ash is the president of Fort William Branch 6. He says there are 3 local legions involved in Thunder Bay's campaign.
We represent the South Ward campaign, and the North Ward is Branch 5 and the Polish Branch 219. So between the 3, we do fairly well. I don't think we're not hurting in terms. We're very able to meet our obligations.
We owe it to the men and women of this country and the world that fight for our freedom and are still fighting for our freedom. We have veterans that are young that came back from Afghanistan in the name of freedom, and we can never forget those people.
Poppies will be available starting on Friday. The local campaign usually raises about $18,000.